Hello, welcome to this video on the 7 pillars of successful software adoption. So in a previous video, I talked about the 3 components for building a bridge across the customer experience chasm. And one of those components is the frameworks. And so these 7 pillars are to do with the frameworks. So as you'll see, my bridge in the picture has got those 7 pillars. So let's take each one of those in turn. And they are in a particular order. You will probably find that you probably move backwards and forwards on the bridge, but they're in a particular order because we're going from that point of sale across to the point of actual sort of adoption and being the customer being cared for by your customer success team or your customer support team or whoever it is, depending on the structure of your organization. So let's have a look at each of the pillars. So the first pillar is understand the customer's aims. So now, one thing I want to point out with this bridge is that you may need multiple bridges. So you may have different versions of your product. You may have different levels of service and so on. So you might have sort of a bronze, silver, gold package or something like that. So you may have slightly different bridges depending on the level of product that someone has bought. And so those bridges may have, as part of that, sort of higher levels of human interaction than others, but it's still important to think about these things for any bridge that you are building. So the first one is understanding the customer aims. So what is it that your customer is actually trying to achieve? Now, I like to think of it as this whole sort of thing about, customers aren't buying the product, they're buying a solution to a problem. I also like to think of it as they're buying change. So this is a change process that they're going through. They're trying to improve something. So what is it that they are actually doing? So, this will tie in very nicely with the marketing messages, but actually it's about being careful of making assumptions because we all know what assume does. Hopefully you know that saying. If you don't, get in touch with me and I'll explain it. So really understanding what's important to your customer. What are their measures of success? I know what's really going to make them go, yes, this is giving us a return on our investment and we are going to keep paying for this product. Next up, we've got identify and manage the key stakeholders. So typically in a sales process, you may well have been dealing with a key sponsor within your client's organization, but actually your software product is probably going to impact more than one department. It's going to have a knock-on impact or have users from different departments. So you really need to make sure that you've identified those key stakeholders. Now, hopefully you've actually identified them before they've signed on the dotted line, and that's really helped you sort of position the product correctly. But if you haven't, then it's really important to do it at this stage because that helps you to identify your supporters, any blockers, and sort of how you're going to manage those people. So that's number 2. Number 3, we've got understanding the user audience. So this links very nicely to our stakeholders. Part of our stakeholder groups are our users, so the users of the software. But this is going into a level of detail a little bit further. So what we're talking about here is this idea of user personas. So on the one hand, you've got an idea of who your ideal customer is, sort of as if it's a business to business side of things, but then you've got the user. Now, this does still work in sort of the more consumer market as well, because a product might be bought in the consumer market that's actually being used by other people. So you need to understand who's actually using the product, and things like their motivation, thinking about what's in it for them, sort of things like their attitude to technology, so generational and demographics and so on may come into play in there. So I do have a worksheet that I use with clients that sort of takes them through that user persona. Again, sometimes we may have to make some generalizations if we've got off-the-shelf products, whereas with maybe the larger implementations, we work a lot more closely with the client on that as part of a project, in which case we may be able to get a little bit more familiar with that user base and actually sort of really draw up some typical personas for that organisation. Pillar number 4 is familiarisation. So this is really familiarising yourself with what that client does and how they operate. Again, off-the-shelf products, it may be having to do some generalizations, but this means staying close to your customers and spending some time with them, understanding how they actually use your product in the real world. Because no matter how well we design a software product, we've got an idea of how it should be used to get the most of it. All our customers will be slightly different. They'll have their own little quirks of how they do things, and they'll have different sort of processes and systems that sort of bolt into that as the bigger picture. So that will have an impact of how they can effectively use your product. So therefore, if you can familiarise yourself with how they work, what sort of a day-to-day thing looks like for them, that can really help. And also that really helps with sort of what the priorities are. So what is it that they need to be able to do pretty much from day one with the product versus what might be a secondary factor for them that might be a later phase of their implementation. It's a nice to have, it's not a must have. So, understanding that, and again, that's at the sort of stakeholder senior leadership level, but then you've also got it at the user level, because actually they may not be quite the same, and you're trying to bridge that gap so that you get success within all the stakeholders. Next up, we've got take a task-focused approach. So what I mean by this is thinking about these tasks that people need to be able to do with your software. So this links back to the familiarisation. So you know what they need to do on a daily basis. You know sort of what that looks like for them. So therefore, that helps you prioritise what they need to be able to do with the product. So what I'm talking about is tasks, not system. You may have all the whistles and bells. You may have the best product in your industry, but actually, a lot of people won't care about that. They want to be able to turn up, do their job, do it quickly and easily, in a way that's not going to cause them frustration. So initially, at least, the whistles and bells may not be important. Again, this goes back to the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves. So by taking that task-focused approach, you can really focus that, and maybe even for the larger implementations, think about phases of, okay, well, let's get people really confident and competent with these features because it enables them to do X, Y, and Z, and then we'll move on to this. Now, you may want to throw some bits in about the future stuff because that will tantalise them. They'll go, oh, actually, that's quite exciting. Our old product didn't do that, or yeah, that would really help us. But get them comfortable with the basics first. Then we're looking at obtaining the right skills. So have you got the right people in the right place in your organisation? Do they have the skills they need to be able to do all of this stuff that I'm talking about, to move those customers along that journey? So do they have sort of the business analysis skills that they need? Do they have training design skills in terms of building any sort of customer education products that go alongside this? I know, and that's training design for face-to-face or online learning, whatever your blend is. Do they have the skills for delivery of that? Do they have the right sort of customer service skills? Do they know enough around sort of managing stakeholders and all of those sorts of things? So just having a think about, are people in the right place within your organisation? How does that structure look? Is that working, or is there maybe something that you can do to improve that side of things? Then finally, bit of a catch-all this one, follow up. So as you go across this bridge, you will be learning things all of the time about your customers. So I know the stuff that comes in through, say, those learning engagements, what's happening with that? How is that being reported back? When a customer is logging a request through your support department, how is that being looked at and managed, and how is that all feeding in? I know what's the feedback about the product, but also I know what's the feedback about the product within the context of the customer's organisation, for you to be able to act on that, to be responsive, to build that know, like and trust with your customer, to really build that relationship and that experience, to move us on to obviously what we're aiming for is customer loyalty and customer advocacy, so that if people leave that customer organisation, they take your product with them, or if they know a friend or a business associate that's looking for a system like yours, that they're going to recommend you first and say, yeah, definitely speak to this company. So it's really important that you've also got those follow-up processes in place, because the last thing you want to do is put all of the effort in to the sale and the implementation, and then they still end up walking away and actually you've missed the signals. So that's it, the 7 pillars of successful software adoption. If you have any questions, then please do get in contact with me, email, book a call with me, whatever works for you. LinkedIn, I'd love to talk about your 7 pillars and how you're getting on and areas that perhaps you can improve.